Hey, this is Joel from Twin Tribes, and you're listening to the New Wave Music Podcast.
Well, welcome back to the New Wave Music Podcast. I'm Steve. Unfortunately, T-Bone is not able to join us today. However, our guest joining us is a musician you might recognize from songs like Wetter. You burn me out like a flame. I want you. Your body's the reason that I came. The wetter, the better. I want you, I want you. You run me off the rails like a train. I want you. Your body is the reason that I came. The wetter, the better. I want you, I want you. End of the line.
It's the end of the line, yeah. And we never did find our way. It's the end of the line, yeah. And we're sliding, sliding away. I watch you sliding, sliding away.
And the outstanding track Secret.
I've got this feeling in my bones that we are never going home. I've got this secret. I've got no regret. I've got this feeling in my bones that we are never going home, never going home.
If you guessed Julian Shah-Tayler, you're going to be absolutely right. Julian, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, lovely to be back, Steve. Thank you. Can you see my thing on the wall here?
Vaguely. It looks like a top 10 list.
It's a top 10 list from the New Wave podcast.
Oh, nice. I believe we had you at number 4 that year.
This is indeed true. So thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be back amongst you.
Since we last spoke last year, you've been incredibly busy. Not just touring nonstop with Strangelove, but also collaborating, among other artists, with Beauty and Chaos on the song Kiss Me Goodbye.
Kiss me goodbye, we'll let it ride. Kiss me goodbye, we'll never turn it back. Kiss me goodbye, we'll watch it tumbling down. Kiss me goodbye.
How did that collaboration come about?
Well, it's funny. I was working with David J. and we got to talking about Schecter and this wonderful guy, Michael Saravallo, who's the leading light for Beauty and Chaos. I met with him and he told me that he was doing a track with Wayne Hussey of the Mission UK, which is one of my favorite bands. So I said, oh, well, let me do a remix. I'd love to do a remix of Wayne Hussey.
Diving for pearls, now I'm coming up for air. I'm casting off the chains that drag me deep. I've been swimming around in circles, chasing dolphins everywhere. But I'm no longer shedding tears, no more tears shall I weep for you.
So that's initially how I started working with him. So I did the remix. Wayne really liked it. So I did about 4 on that album of remixes. And of course, Michael and I became friends. And he realized that, maybe it would be an idea to have me vocalize on something because he likes my songwriting. So we did a song together and it was the first single from the new Beauty and Chaos album, Dancing with Angels.
So you've also collaborated with a wide range of artists. Are there any collaborations that stand out as particularly memorable or meaningful to you?
I mean, all of them in their own way. I love working with other people. Certainly, the new Strangelove single is coming out. So, working with Leo Lugansky, who's the singer of Strangelove, was really fun. I mean, we're good friends, so that was a learning experience.
Since we spoke last, you've released several Bowie tribute albums, including the most recent Hunger City celebrating Diamond Dog's 50th anniversary.
This
It
is right.
features a fantastic version of Rebel Rebel that you did.
They put you down, they say I'm wrong. You track a thing, you put them on. You're a rebel, rebel, you torn your dress. Rebel, rebel, your face is a mess. Rebel, rebel, how could they know? Hot tramp, I love you so.
What drew you to doing that album?
Diamond Dogs has always been one of my favorite albums by Bowie. It was the one that I got first on cassette and, listened to again and again and again. I was a big fan of George Orwell as well. So when I kind of figured out that there was a reference there to 1984 and Big Brother and all that sort of stuff, it was kind of a thrill because, literature and music sort of cross over sometimes, but not that often. And when it does, it's very interesting to me because I'm an avid reader. So Orwell being one of my favorite authors was, it's good that Bowie was into him, although he was denied the rights to use the rights to the actual book. So
Really?
yeah, the Orwell's widow refused Bowie the rights to expand the idea of making a 1984 musical, basically.
A question we've asked all our artists that we interview is, do you have a favorite gig or tour memory that stands out to you?
Gig or tour memory? I remember on one of my last ever shows with my old band Whitey. I stage dived at a festival, so I have footage of me sort of like carrying my guitar over all these people's heads, and that was quite fun. I would not normally stage dive, but I just felt that I'm not going to be in this band much longer. I was planning to leave, so I just decided to make the most of it.
What's your favorite part about performing live, and how do you approach it differently than recording an album?
I really enjoy live. I mean, I enjoy being able to connect with the audience and sort of get the reaction in real time. I mean, I've been very lucky to be opening up for Strangelove, which means that, I'll get to play my songs in front of 1,000 people who've never heard of me before. Now I'm starting to see people in the audience who know the songs very well and they're singing the words, which is a thrill. I mean, that's a novelty to me. I mean, most of the bands I've been in have been on their way up. And now I've got this sort of Trojan horse into their, record collection. So it's quite cool.
We've seen you numerous times as part of Strangelove. You've been performing as the Electric Duke. One day I hope to see you performing your own songs originally in person.
I would love that. It's possibly going to happen soon because we're doing very well with the me opening up thing. So hopefully.
Your last album, Elysium, as you mentioned, did make my number. I think it was number 4 for the year 20. Was it back in 2022?
Number 4, 2022. Yes.
Yes, it's been a little bit. Since then, you have a brand new album that's kind of a follow up to that. What can you tell us about the new album?
So Elysium, which I have here, a signed copy with David J's signature on it. Well, these are for sale, by the way. And Honne Tatemae, which also has David J's signature on it, and mine and Ash and Phoebe, my daughters, who all performed on the record, again, also for sale. It's basically the flip side of Elysium. Elysium, if you remember, was the joyful love album, all being completely wrapped up in some, I guess, unrealistic vision of what love can be. And then Honne Tatemae, unfortunately, is what happens when that love kind of falls apart and the relationship ends. Honne Tatemae is definitely structured to repeat. So the end of the album ends with Mike Garson's piano, Mike Garson, who played with Bowie, trailing off into the distance. And the beginning of the album is that actually backwards, with me sort of talking the album in. So it's like a part of a big cycle. And also, if you know, I mean, musically, there are certain elements of Lights Out, which is the final song on this album, that hark back to the song End of the Line, which is the beginning of Elysium. So anybody that's actually has ears and listens to my work as a whole, as I intend the albums to be listened to all the way through, if they listen to the two albums all the way through, they'll see these sort of light motifs, as they're called in music, recurring. So that would be interesting for somebody who's a musicologist.
So sonically, the new album has a bit of a dark wave and new wave feel to it. Were there any specific influences that shaped its sound?
On this record, it's actually funny. It's quite eclectic, but it seems to hang together quite well nonetheless. And I wouldn't say there was a specific go-to for influences. I mean, I'm a huge Radiohead fan, so I think there's a bit of Johnny Greenwood in the guitar playing. I would flatter myself in thinking so. Obviously, I'm a big Bowie fan, so there's actually Mike Garson on the record and Carmine Rojas. So obviously there's a bit of Bowie influence, certainly for that song. I'm trying in some senses to reference all of my favorite things like shoegaze and the Cocteau Twins sort of make, those are an influence. But it certainly doesn't sound like any of those bands, I wouldn't say. So
Well, before we really get into the new album, one other question. Were there any guest musicians, producers, or collaborators that played a significant role in shaping the album?
I once again worked a little bit with Robert Margouleff, who helped me produce Fisk.
Of all the fish in the sea, the biggest is me. I'll turn the pressure on. Of all the birds in the sky, man, I swoop and I dive. I'll turn the pressure on.
Then he sort of guided me along the process of Lights Out.
After all your hope is gone, will the last one on this one, please turn the lights out.
That song took a long time to put together because it's a structured song in the same way as All Good Soldiers is. It's got parts that are sort of structured together, and it was a difficult one to finish, and Robert helped me with that. But aside from that, not really. I mean, it was a very insular record in the sense that I've been sitting with my, pain and experience for a few years, and so I've just been sort of like going inward rather than looking outward for influence.
Well, I love how the album takes the listener on a real journey. I was surprised how unflinching it is at times. It's kind of dark and deeply reflecting. Was it a conscious decision to structure the album the way that you did? And what do you hope listeners take away from the listening experience?
It's funny. I had some help with structuring from Catherine Yeski-Taylor, a friend of mine who's a journalist who wrote an article on me in American Songwriter magazine for this print edition. And we discussed the structure because the structure has modified somewhat, because at one point it was in chronological order to the events that are being described. But then we realized in collusion that it might be better structured in a sort of narrative that makes sense narratively rather than, chronologically things make sense to me, but they don't necessarily make sense in tone. So, we did think a lot about. I did think a lot about it with her. I feel like this is the right order and structure. I did a lot with Elysium too. I mean, Elysium was very thought through, and it was structured in that order for the narrative purpose, not necessarily in a chronological way. I had an interview the other day where we talked about the falling off the cliff into that sort of darkness of Lights Out. But what I really liked about their insight was that Lights Out is an observer song. It's not a depression song. I think that's something that I've learned, through my life, but certainly through this series of experiences over the last few years, is that one has to experience everything deeply, and one has to observe it rather than take it all too seriously. Because obviously pain and heartache happens all the time. And one just has to accept that life flows and that you will not be stuck in this zone forever. And I think in some ways I'm hoping that is a message that will come out of the album, although I'm not sure it's necessarily very overt in the way it is.
Well, the album kicks off with the track Forever, which I found to be kind of more of an upbeat track that carries maybe a bit of hope and reflection. What inspired that song and how did that come about?
That was one of the first songs that I wrote actually for the protagonist of Elysium. And it didn't make the Elysium album just because there were enough songs that were bubbly and hopeful on that record that it sort of made sense. I mean, I was going to leave it off forever. Sorry, for Honne Tatemae, just because of that, because it doesn't really fit with the darkness of the rest of the album. But then there always has to be one jewel as point of light so you can appreciate the darkness, I think. So, and I think that that's where it comes from. Also it's a nice Valentine's song. So
After that track, the album takes a turn into more of heartbreak with Sufferation. What was the emotional journey behind this shift, and what does this song represent to you?
that's the transition from the end of the relationship into the, because it's very, very hard. It was very hard, and it's still hard to, distance yourself from something that's so precious. If you allow yourself to fall back into the same cycle, problems still don't evaporate. You just find yourself going back into the same thing. So I had to be very stoic and just be separate from the object of my desire and my love, because otherwise I just fall into the same pattern. And sometimes a relationship isn't meant to be. And sufferation is just me contemplating what I lose from being separated from somebody. And the sufferations, I mean, it's sufferation. So there's suffering in the separation, and that's the portmanteau that I use, sufferation. It's actually a reggae word, believe it or not. And I looked it up, and lots of reggae songs have been written called sufferation. Obviously, mine is not a reggae song, but I think they have a similar sentiment behind the songs that they've written it for that. And the end segment, the bit where it changes key, basically it's a mishmash of chess analogies and Shakespeare monologues about suffering.
This album definitely takes you on an emotional journey with shifts in tones that deeply feel intentional on tracks like Malicious Intent.
I can't believe you are so weak, you fairground clown. Bewilder me in mediocrity. You started war, I'll burn it all down. Malicious intent. Malicious intent. You got malicious intent. I got malicious intent.
And Bleed.
'Cause I don't wanna see you bleed. No, 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 don't wanna see you bleed. No, 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 don't wanna see you bleed. Don't wanna see you bleed. Everything that you touch, you have to give away. Everyone that you love will leave you anyway. Everything that you touch, you have to give away.
They bring in a heavier, more industrial sound, capturing maybe some raw anger of heartbreak and loss. How did you approach blending these sonic shifts to reflect the emotional depth of the album?
I mean, the Malicious Intent song is my angriest song I've ever written. It's a very big betrayal. My best friend of 25 years decided to distinctly betray me and spy on me, and he is a snake of the most disgusting order. And I find that music is catharsis. So I, obviously after the end of my love relationship and then my best friend doing the same, it was a difficult time. So I felt very angry, and I express myself emotionally a lot better through writing songs than I do with my fists. So I feel like, that was a way to do it best without resulting in any untoward activity. Plus, because my daughter is involved in the whole mess, I wanted her to be on the song so she could remind me that she's the most important thing. And that's why she finishes the song. Make it stop. And she's telling me that. She's not telling this guy he can go jump off a cliff. But I have to stop feeling this way because this is about her. This is about focusing on her happiness and her peace. You know, I'm old enough to deal with it. She's 10.
The song Turn to Stone really caught me by surprise.
In the dead of night, on the long way home, you suffocate and turn to stone. In the dead of night, on the long way home, you suffocate and turn to stone.
I found myself completely drawn into the lyrics. The way your vocals are mixed on this track, to me, also added another level of depth. Can you share the story behind this song and how you approached its production?
Turn to Stone is an old song, actually. It's not specifically related to this relationship devolving, but it could very well be applied to the same thing. I mean, it's a very similar situation. Basically, definitely wanted to create something which is quite Cure-like, I think. To me, it reminds me of, you know, the sort of disintegration era Cure. The song itself is about, you know, having to walk away from something that's very precious to you and having great regret. That it references back, you know, the you are section references back to another song that I wrote, which has a very similar, Your Eyes, because it's like the repetition of It's Only You That Makes Me Feel This Way is from my song Evolution. And then this song sort of just says, you are. And it doesn't really state what that person is, but you can extrapolate that they might well be this whole of the thought. And I'm having to walk away and turn to stone in that moment. It's a difficult realization and reality when you know that you have to walk away, right?
So if we can talk about the song Fall Apart.
You can watch my life fall apart in broken hearts before your very eyes. You can see my dreams turn to dust without trust before your very eyes.
To me, that's a standout track. The melody, the lyrics, and the way everything comes together makes it truly special. How did this song kind of come about? And was this one of the first ones that you kind of released or teased for the new album?
This one was actually also written in the middle of the relationship that Elysium was describing. It wasn't after the end. It was just we were having some tricky times, and I was devastated with the situation at the time. And so I wrote the song with possibly without the intention of playing it for her, because, you know, I didn't want to, I guess, expose my vulnerability or I didn't want to harass somebody emotionally or intellectually to hear me in some ways. I always like to take distance before I release a song so I can see where it lies in the sort of general psychological makeup of what I'm doing. Because at the time I wrote it, we were separated, but we got back together, and that releasing that song or playing that song would not have furthered my agenda any.
So another song that I really need to ask about is Buds and the Bees.
And I thank you for letting me go. There's something that I need to know before you get down on your knees. How do the birds and the bees?
The title itself is very intriguing. What's the story behind that?
So I lived in a castle for a while in Pasadena, which was the honey castle or the bees castle, because the guy that owned the castle used to make honey. And buds obviously is can be seen two ways. Buds are both buds of flowers or they are weed. I don't really do well with weed and weed smoking, so that was a reference to that. And the bees, I mean, obviously bees are buzz buzz bees. You can hear my daughter being a bee on that. She's multi-tracked as a bee in the second verse. She's on a lot of tracks on this album. But the bees, BES, is about being present. It's a kind of almost a Buddhist way of looking at it. It's like, be present here. You don't need to smoke weed to be alive and experience life. Like that's a double meaning on the title. But obviously the song itself kind of talks about birds and bees, obviously. But there's a word for, Bowie used it a lot actually. In the Villa of All Men it sounds like in the Villa of All Men, but it isn't. So buds and the bees, birds and the bees, I don't know, just playing with language a little bit for the title.
One other thing I really liked on that song was there's that synth riff that's running throughout the track that I found to be incredibly infectious. How did that element come about?
There is a synth riff. No, it's a guitar.
Oh, it's a guitar.
Yeah.
My mistake.
Actually, somebody else had commented on that on another interview, actually, or a review. They were talking about that as a synth riff. No, it's a guitar.
It makes the song work very well, and again, one of my standout favorites on the album.
I'm thrilled. That's my favorite on the album. It's my heartfelt favorite. There's the reason the album is called Honne Tatemae is Honne means the reality, your real desires, and Tatemae is the thing you present to the world. So what I've used it to mean is there are songs on this album which are heartfelt, eviscerating, ripping your heart out and talking about it. And then there are some songs like Buds and the Bees and This Charming Life.
This charming life is where I'll be. While I take my time to mold these sounds into a melody. You know I can light up your sky with fire.
Which are, you cannot tell what I'm talking about because I've veiled a lot of the meaning of the words in non-specific terms. And I think the Birds and the Bees, and especially This Charming Life, they are the Tatemae, and then Fall Apart is the Honne.
Well, you've mentioned your daughter's on several tracks throughout this album. How did your daughter like being involved with the album with you?
She's a very joyful, happy little girl, and she is fascinated by, she's beginning to come more understanding of what it is that I do, and she's fascinated by the process. So we've done a couple of songs together. She's not really a performer. She is to me, but she wouldn't go out and do it on the stage. But when we're in the studio and I ask her to do humming or sing along, she's really thrilled to do it, and it's a joy to have her do it because there's some, as I say, the darkness of the album and the darkness of the sadness of the sentiment, the counterbalance to my life and how I have been through that sadness. And I'm through it now. I feel very happy right now. The counterbalance has been Phoebe. She keeps me sane. She keeps me focused on what's important, which is love and joy, compassion and kindness. And that's what a 10-year-old can teach you. And so she's on the record for that reason in some ways.
Now, you mentioned the album is kind of a little bit of more of a dark one than we've heard from you in the past. To me, it kind of had that vibe of The Cure's Disintegration. I loved how it flowed. But one thing I really appreciate is the Bandcamp version of your album includes Civilization.
And you are not my enemy. We're all the victims of duplicity. It's all over. A civilization broke. One nation undergo smoke. A civilization broke. A civilization's broken. As we become uncivilized.
After the emotional journey that the album takes you on, I feel that this song's maybe more of a much needed kind of a pick me up or a lift up to end the listening experience. What made you decide to include that as a bonus track?
It was a single. I released it as a single. It was in discussion with Catherine Yeski-Taylor. She's been quite a guide for me, just because it's good to have somebody to reflect. I mean, she understands the music. This is her kind of vibe. So when I was pitching the album, Civilization was going on the album. But as she correctly pointed out, it does not have anything to do with thematically the rest of the record. So there's another song coming out called "King of America." I mean, it's my ham-fisted attempt at politics in music. So there's Civilization, which obviously is it talks about the disintegration of kindness and joy, and because I don't care if you're left or right, just be kind, and that's a problem. And I don't want to get into it. It's not my jurisdiction. I do follow politics. I don't want people to know what my politics are. But, King of America is a song that's coming out in a couple of weeks, I think. And that will probably be included on the Bandcamp as an update when it's out.
Well, Julian, before we wrap up, I do have to ask you about something you brought up at the beginning of this interview. That is the upcoming Strangelove album. And I believe there's a new single on the way as well. What can you tell us about it?
So I've been petitioning for this for a very long time, because obviously a lot of people have asked, can we get some Strangelove songs? And there's a perennial criticism of tribute bands, which is both unfair and silly, really. It's like people will say, oh, well, you do the Depeche Mode and it's great. It's not as good as the real thing, but you're really good at what you do. Why don't you do your own music, though? Every tribute band and cover band gets this same criticism. So we've been working hard to allay that criticism. I mean, obviously, I'm not the singer of Strangelove, so I can do my own music and it's fine. But Leo has got to do his own music, or everybody says, well, you can't do your own music. You just have to jump around like Dave Gahan. So we worked on this song. We wrote it together, Leo and I, and then we got everybody in the band to put their contributions in. And we got Darwin Miners to mix it. He's wonderful, plays with night crickets, and also he's a fabulous artist in his own right. He mixed 3 of the songs on my album, by the way, just as he's a great mixer these days. So we mixed it. We're really thrilled with it. It's called Sublime. On the CD version that we'll be bringing around with us to Europe, the European tour, we have 3 mixes of it. We have the Darwin mix, which is the original with everybody. Then we have my mix. I remixed it, which is fabulous, of course. And then we have an Entre Nous remix, which is my brother-in-law, who did a kind of a house, electro house version, which is... All 3 of them, I think, are great. People will be very surprised. And the rest of the album is Depeche Mode covers. They're not tribute covers. They are versions. So there's a version of Useless, which is the whole band playing live. That's us. I did a version of In Your Room and Question of Lust, which are my versions. They're not... Obviously, they're the same song, but it's different. And then Leo's done a couple of ones. And then Brent and I recorded a bunch of songs in my living room, just with piano and voice. So we've included some of those too.
When does the album come out?
It's going to be, I have a box of the CDs in my daughter's room currently. So I'm not opening the box until I'm with the band. I want to do an unboxing with everybody there because, that's only fair.
So is the album going to be just a physical version, or it will be on streaming or digital?
We have signed a record deal with the guy that's doing my greatest hits. The other thing that's going on with me is that I'm releasing remixes by a gentleman called David Chatfield. He's been putting remixes of my stuff together, and he's releasing a full album at the end of this year. So I brought him in to release the Strangelove stuff too. What he's very skilled at is making things sound tight and then getting it out into the world, like marketing and stuff like that. So we signed with him, and he will be releasing it. I don't know when, because the Strangelove entity is Brent's jurisdiction. Much as I, love being in charge and kingpin, I'm not in this case. So I can't really answer those questions, but it's great. I think you'll enjoy it.
Now, you mentioned you're going on tour Strangelove in Europe. That looks to be like kind of a big tour that you guys are doing. It's not just like one or two stops. It's like a full-on tour. Do you want to plug your
four
tour dates?
countries. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do you want to plug your tour dates for any of those shows?
First one is in Prague on 29th of March, I believe. Then we're going to Brno. Then we are going to Berlin, Leipzig, Dresden, Warsaw, Copenhagen. I'm really excited because I've never been to Brno and I've never been to Warsaw. So I've been all the other places because I've toured in Europe extensively. But for Strangelove, this is a really big deal. We've made the transition, a little bit of legitimacy. And this is part of the reason why we wanted to release something physical, so we could say, well, this is a tribute, and then this is what we are like.
Now, you did mention you had your signed CDs as well. How can our listeners get those?
So you just have to DM me on socials and all that stuff. I don't have a shop area. These ones are going to be special. They have, as you can see, they have David J's signature, which most people will be interested in. And I'm going to get Chris Olivas, who's also played from Berlin. He's played on several of the songs as my drummer. And so this will be in part of a package. I'm going to do a lyric sheet thing, signed, special limited edition prints inside that. Then the just me signed copies will be available for $20, but you have to just DM me. But these ones will be a package, and it will be more expensive because it's really hard collecting the signatures, especially David's. That was. I'm very happy that he agreed to come and sign them. So,
well, Julian, thanks again for taking time to join us here on the New Wave Music Podcast. The new album is fantastic. I highly encourage our audience to check it out and give it a listen. Also, I hope to see you, like I said, perform live soon someday.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.
If this is your first time listening, we thank you and ask that you please subscribe. That's a great way to support us. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave us a 5-star review. You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for New Wave Music Podcast. We'll catch you on the next episode.